Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel InfoSec Lab, and today we are going to continue our series of attacking and defeating AWS services from Try learning path. In today's topic is going to be AWS API Gateway. Okay, let's get started. Introduction. It's hard to find a website in 2022 that doesn't make extensive use of application programming language interface or APIs to provide the various functionalities of the website the end users in their browsers. APIs have become ubiquitous and critical part of modern technology stack. As a quick overview for those unfamiliar, this task will discuss the basics of API. Before explaining what an API is, it is helpful to define the key component of an HTTPS API. API component. Endpoint. This is the URL location of the API, the address where you can call an API and the resources it can access on your behalf. This specifies the type of request being method. This specifies the type of request being made to the API, such as get, post, put, or delete. Headers. These are a component of HTTP, but are used by APIs to contain additional information about the request, such as authentication details, content type, and other metadata. Request body. This is the data sent to the API as a part of the request. GET requests won't typically have any request body, but post, put, and delete requests almost always do. Response. This is the data that API sends in response to the request. It may include a status code, headers, and response body. API purpose. APIs provide a granular mechanism for developers to allow users to access potentially sensitive backend resources. Not only do API expose these capabilities for end user, but they also allow third parties to build reliable ecosystems around a product that exposes an API. Notably, this caused recent controversy as Twitter burned third-party client access to the Twitter API. This controversy only reiterates the significance of APIs for organizations using modern technology. Furthermore, as mentioned, modern APIs often expose a number of sensitive backend resources hosted on the behalf of the API. These resources are often microservices that proxy the user request as a direct database write or query to the various systems that may be supporting the API functionality. If security errors are made in the development of the API capabilities, they may be exposed to any user who can authenticate to the API, or even to unauthenticated users who attempt to use the API. These characteristics make AWS API Gateway a prime target for the attackers. Answer the questions. What is the URL location at API call? Endpoints. What request type commonly doesn't include a request body? Get. Okay. Accessing the environment. This one just to configure your AWS account on your TryHackMe. So as usual, I'm gonna skip this one. Okay, API Gateway overview. AWS API Gateway. API Gateway is a service provided by AWS to assist customers in deploying REST, HTTPS, and WebSocket API using serverless infrastructure. While REST and HTTP APIs are similar, WebSocket APIs are inherently different because the WebSocket protocol allows for bidirectional communication. This means that the WebSocket APIs can push information to clients who have connected without the client sending an additional request. AWS Lambda and its special integration with API Gateway. API Gateway essentially provides an API mechanism to attach to other AWS resources. That means when someone on the internet queries an API behind AWS API Gateway, they are commonly interacting with other AWS services or resources. These capabilities are known as integrations. Specifically, API gateways will most often integrate with AWS Lambda functions, because Lambda is the default AWS service proxy for API gateway endpoints. If you have never worked with Lambda or other serverless functions. They allow you to write scripts and other small programs that can be executed on your behalf by AWS without ever provisioning a server. Integration introduction. Lambda functions aren't the only service that you may integrate with, but they also serve as a second special function in relation to AWS API Gateway, the Lambda Authorizer. The Lambda Authorizer, when configured, determines who can access the endpoints behind an API gateway and what resources they can request to access. These authorizers are custom code developed by the organization deploying the gateway and are arbitrary, configurable to make decisions based on any set of characteristics a developer may choose. When misconfigured, the code may allow unintended or unauthorized access to resources behind an API gateway. We'll take a closer look at this idea later on this room. What does the WebSocket API additionally allow compared to REST or HTTPS API? Bidirectional communication. Yes. What default function does Lambda perform for API gateway endpoints? AWS reverse proxy? No. Default. Or serverless, is it? Yeah. Service proxy. Okay, AWS service proxy. AWS service proxy. Okay. What is special secondary function of Lambda? Authorizer. Okay. Alright, moving on. Common service integrations with API gateway. Common services and purposes. API gateways are pillar of modern technology platforms. Whether using a managed API gateway, such as the ones available at all major cloud providers, or a self-managed gateway that you might build yourself, it's impossible to deploy a microservices style architecture without something like an API gateway. AWS offers first-class support for many of their services to integrate with API gateway, providing a number of common capabilities that you would need for an API gateway and for a wide variety of use cases. Serverless architecture. API gateway can be integrated with AWS Lambda to build serverless application, where the Lambda function is triggered by API gateway to process incoming requests and return responses. Microservices. API gateway can be used to create, deploy, and manage APIs for microservices, allowing for easier communication and integration between services. These microservices could be any server, container, or serverless function, along with a variety of services for messaging like SNS, SQS, Event Bridge, etc. Data storage and retrieval. API gateway integrates with Amazon DynamoDB and Amazon S3 to provide seamless access to store data. Real-time communication. API gateway can be used with WebSockets to provide real-time bidirectional communication between clients and servers. API management. API gateway provides tools for monitoring, logging, and managing APIs, making it easier to understand and control API usage. Security. API gateway provides robust security features, including OAuth 2.0 and AWS Identity and Access Management (IAM) integration for the access control, and SSL or TLS encryption for data in transit. These are some of the most common use cases for integrating services with API gateway, but there are many more possibilities as API gateway is a highly flexible and scalable service. Alright, answer the following questions. What are the two aspects that WebSockets for API gateway provides? First one is real-time, and then second one is bidirectional. Real-time bidirectional communication. Okay, using API gateway for offensive purposes. API gateway serve a nifty purpose when hacking. Namely, API gateway is a serverless reverse proxy. A reverse proxy is a server that sits between the clients and the web server, forwarding client requests to the web server and returning the server's responses back to the client. Reverse proxies are commonly used for load balancing, caching, SSL termination, and hiding the identity of the underlying web server. Hackers can use the proxy as a way to hide their identity while launching attacks on the web server or on the targets. In fact, when used as a pass-through proxy, with a pool of IP addresses, you can effectively make any given request appear coming from any IP address in the pool. Reverse proxies for hackers. Rotating IP addresses when using a proxy can be valuable for security testers for a variety of reasons. First, bypassing IP-based restriction. Some web applications and systems may block requests from a specific IP addresses if they detect unusual or suspicious activity. By rotating IP addresses, security testers can bypass these restrictions and continue testing. Evading detection. Some systems may have security measures in place that detect and block requests from known IP addresses of security testers. By rotating the IP addresses, security tester can evade detection and continue testing. Okay. Simulating real-world scenarios. In real-world scenarios, users access websites and applications from different IP addresses. By rotating the IP addresses, security tester can simulate real-world scenarios more accurately and identify potential security vulnerabilities that may arise. To rotate IP addresses when using a proxy, one option is to use the rotating proxy service. This type of service automatically switches between the pool of proxy servers, ensuring that each request is sent from a different IP address. Another option is to manually switch between different proxy servers, either by manually configuring the proxy setting in the browser or by using a tool that allows for automatic switching between proxy servers. Enter AWS API Gateway and a tool called FireProx, written by Mike Felch of Black Hill Information Security. Mike notes in the README of the project is that he wasn't the first person to discover this wonderful feature, FireProx. For this next activity, you will need to log in and use your TryHackMe AWS credentials, either by configuring them in the AWS CLI or on the DAC box, or by using AWS Cloud Shell. So I've already configured my AWS account on this terminal, so we should be good to go. FireProx is a tool designed for AWS API Gateway for rotating your IP addresses when making web requests. It implements an API Gateway endpoint that redirects all the requests to a configured domain or IP address. This capability has proven particularly useful for password spreading and similar credentials attack. It is also useful for making requests to HTTPS or WebSocket endpoints that might implement IP-based restrictions or rate limiting. This proves particularly useful when querying APIs that implement IP-based rate limiting. It turns out our good friends at Best Cloud Company have their own API endpoint. We can use FireProx to make requests to Best Cloud Company by deploying a FireProx endpoint. Okay. Using AWS Cloud Shell, no, we're not using this one. We're using this one, TryHackMe attack box. When FireProx is already installed in this directory, okay, before continuing configuring AWS credentials, okay, we did that. When you are in the appropriate directory of the FireProx, okay, so cd opt FireProx, okay, run the following command: python 9 fire.pyr. Okay. This command will simply output the help information regarding a FireProx. Hard to pronounce. FireProx. Python. Okay, let's run this following command: python FireProx create URL and then API sec. Okay, make sure that you use Python 3. Okay. Cool. Next, you can go into the browsers and use this URL right here. I'll copy the link address. Open Firefox. Okay. It's right here. So usually as a regular user, this is the API endpoint of the best cloud company or HTTPS api.bestcloudcompany. This is the regular API endpoint for the best cloud company. But because we were using API gateway as a proxies, then the URL will be this one. This is going to be the new URL generated by the proxy servers. Even though they take you to the same place, but the information that appear on the server end is different. The IP address is different. The source IP address is different. It's not going to show the attack box IP address like when you visit the website and the API endpoint directly. Okay. Okay, here it also explains if you were to look at the server logs for the API gateway instance hosting API based cloud, you would see each request coming through the Firefox endpoint comes from a separate IP address. Once you are finished with Firefox, you will want to delete endpoints you are no longer using. Okay. So let's see. Do you have anything? Okay, let's try deleting all the endpoint. Python 3 file.py command list. Python 3 file.py command delete API ID. Should be this one. Let's use this one. All right, see that we actually deleted one API endpoint. See, now there are only two left right here. Well, the reason there are so many right now because I did attempt this room earlier before, so which explain why there are two other proxy endpoints right here, which I should have deleted, but I didn't. Okay. Moving on. What's the serverless capability at AWS API Gateway represents? Reverse proxy. Yes. What does rotating IP addresses allow you to bypass? IP-based restrictions. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, moving on to last task. Attacking Lambda authorizers on API gateways. Lambda authorizer introduction. Lambda authorizers in API gateway are functions that provide authorizations for API requests. They are used to control access to specific resources fronted by API gateway, ensuring that only authorized users are able to access the resources. A Lambda authorizer function is executed before an API request is processed, and it returns a policy document that specifies whether the request is authorized or not. Lambda authorizers are useful because they allow you to perform complex authorization logic without having to manage infrastructure or write custom authorization code. This makes it easier to manage access control for your APIs, and it also enables you to offload resource-intensive authorization tasks to Lambda. Greedy expansion. Why using wildcard in API path? No, why using wildcards in API paths with Lambda authorizers in API gateway can be convenient. It is important to be mindful of the potential consequences of greedy expansion. The asterisk wildcard is in regex is a greedy operator that matches 0 or more characters in a string. When used in matching URL paths, this can lead to unexpected matches if not used carefully. For example, a regex pattern with a greedy asterisk might match more characters than intended, potentially matching parts of the multiple URL paths. To avoid this, it's important to use grouping and lazy operators to control the match and ensure that it only matches the intended portions of the URL path. For example, if an API path is a wildcard with a wildcard is created to allow access to a specific resource, but an unintended path that includes the approved path name is also created. It may lead to unexpected authorization for that resource. This could result in security vulnerabilities, as users may be able to access restricted resources without proper authorization. For a closer examination of this security weakness in relation to AWS API, please see the fault in our stars by Technique Security, which has been deleted. Abusing greedy expansion of Lambda Authorizer policy. It is important to carefully consider the implications of using wildcards in API paths and to implement proper testing and validation to ensure that unintended consequences do not occur. Unfortunately, our friends at Best Cloud Company dropped the ball. Can you find a way? We start by looking for the web properties associated with the Best Cloud Company, and we stumble upon the API. It wasn't really hard. API bestcloudcompany.org seems pretty obvious in hindsight. Once we identify an API, we would typically use a tool such as FF, or Kite Runner to perform discovery of API endpoints through fuzzing. These techniques and tools can help identify potentially interesting endpoints and opportunities to expose data or gain additional access. These tools are really outside the scope of our hacking because the Best Cloud Company really isn't good at security. You can start by checking out the API documentations in a web browser. Okay. Right here. Best Cloud Company API documentation. Welcome to our company. We have been helping organizations solve their cloud security problems for hundreds of years. We built this API as a password manager for our team. Too many clients to handle credentials for. You can get comfortable with our API by making GET requests to the test stage with test and admin. Test would be the test user and admin. Well, you know, right? Almost forgot, you need to add a header authorization token testing123. Reach out to John once you are familiar with how to make this request, and he'll get you the production state password. SOC 2 compliance. API request commonly requires some sort of request header to validate the requesting party, meaning in this case is the header authorization token testing123. In our case, Best Company indicates a need to use an authorization token header and gives a suggestion on a couple endpoints to try. Let's give it a shot. So let's copy this endpoint first. Let's try requesting the API without the authorization code token. We have the test stage and then the test user unauthorized. Let's try that with a header authorization token testing123. Okay, so we got the API, which is this one, testing 1 2 3. Same thing. So it will apply the same thing and then enumerate the APIs of the admin on the test stage. We should get this value, which I already recorded here. Okay. Okay, so this is what we are going to use the curl command line HTTP utility to perform our request. You may want to use two of the Postman above suite to perform your own API testing API endpoints. Those two can be particularly useful when making complex put or post requests. Using the curl request above, you see the same information as HTML format when you run the command. Next, let's try requesting the one endpoint of the documentation author suggests. We will make our request to a test stage and a test endpoint. So yeah, this is what we tried earlier. The test stage and the test user, which is the test endpoint, which gave us the message unauthorized. And then when we specify the header with authorization token testing 1 2 3, it provides us the API key for both of the admin endpoint and the test endpoint. Okay. All right, let's look at what do we try? I mean, I bet you might come up with somebody how to import prop. Okay, this is where we are. Okay, so it's left as an aside to do file authorization token you might use to access the state endpoint. But can we request API this one? I don't know, can we? Let's try it. Okay, curl v production test, and then with the authorization token testing 1 2 3. Okay, looks like we can. So this is the production, the prod stage of the test user endpoint. So we have prod test, copy and paste right here. So let's see, can we do it with the admin? Huh. Okay, we don't have. Okay, so moving on. Why is it possible? I mean, John needed to give you password, right? Well, it turns out that the best cloud company fell victim to exactly the attack 10G security raised regarding the root expansion. Here's an example of what the Lambda function authorizer policy looks like. Okay, let me explain. So basically, in this policy, it shows if the authorization token is testing 1 2 3, then the resource allowed to be get is asterisk / asterisk and test and then / asterisk, right? So in this case, when we try to request this endpoint, the https api.bestcloudcompany.org/prod/ matches this regex right here. So everything before that is matches right here, and then it comes test with a / and then after that is 0 character or any other string. This is the wildcard too. So basically this URL path satisfy this regex pattern right here. which is why it allows us to get the the user API. All right, similar, the same thing when you try on the test stage over here. What is it? The command line. So annoying. Remember when we first tried this one, we tried on the test stage. So the part https api.bestcloudcompany.org/test/ it matches this pattern right here. It matches everything right here. And come to the test, and then whatever it comes after that, it matches. That's why it was giving you the results. Now, keep in mind that this is a little bit tricky because this is the mistake I made. So how do I say that? Let's use this one. I'm gonna copy this one first. You now want to perform a GET request to the company's API documentation page. I got the HTML, right? And notice here how I have the / at the end. And then in this case, I tried that without the / at the end. It still gives me the same thing. Well, because in this case, it doesn't really matter for the API endpoint, because it's still giving me the same response. But over here, in this case, it's different, and this is the mistake I made. So what I was doing was requesting the same thing right here. No, let's do the production one. Requesting the same thing right here, but I didn't include the /. And because of this, it didn't really match the regex pattern right here. So it returned no values at all. See, like I tried this one with Best Cloud Company. It gives me the message like user is not authorized to access this resource. Whereas if I included the /, it does give me the test users API on production. See the difference? So when you actually try on this exercise, please make sure that you include the / at the end of this API endpoint. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. And I had to spend about 10 to 15 minutes trying to figure out what's wrong with that. Alright, I hope you learned from my mistake. So now, we get this one. We get this new API key, can we? And then, if we take a look at the code right here, if event authorization token is on production token, then everything will be matching with the production stage right here. But the thing is, like, we need to find the production API. How do we find that? I don't know. One thing I could try was like trying to use the values of the test user API on production as the authorization token. So let's try that. Copy curl https api.bestcloudcompany.org the interface so annoying. Best Cloud Company.org admin, and then the header is authorization token, and we use this one. Boom, we're able to get the admin's API on production, which is this one. Okay, so let's try answering the question. What's the API key for the test user? Testing 1, 2, 3. What is API key for the test admin user? Test admin is this one. And last but not least, what is the API key for the production admin user? This one. And that's it for today's group. We were able to exploit the grid expansion, which is very popular in API implementation. And we learned how to use that to exploit the API endpoints of a application. Well, nowadays, a lot of developers have getting more awareness of these vulnerabilities, but still, you can find a lot of bad coding practices out there, bad implementation out there, which is why we have to pay attention to this endpoint. And then if we get a hand to the source code or the policy, or if you get a hold of the Lambda Authorizer, read the policy, you may gain something from there, and you may use that as a leverage to exploit the API endpoint. Okay, that's it for today's video, and if you have any question, again, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you with. And without that, thank you very much for watching my video and watch me struggle through the exercises. Again, thank you, and see you again next time. Bye.